Hi, it's Chris Titley here, and on today's episode of Scoreboard, the podcast, I'm joined by Rupert McCall in person, Tuesday the 20th of May on a beautiful Brisbane afternoon. Welcome to Scoreboard.
It's nice to be here, and it is a cracker of a day, and I look forward to our chat.
Rupert, how's your 2025 started?
Uh, no major complaints. I think every year, except for the COVID years, takes the shape of something that it's not predictable, but there's a formula to surviving, and I call it a roller coaster ride actually.
Yep.
And I start out the year wondering where the hell I'm going to get my gigs from, and quite often when the whistle blows for the footy season, life starts to take shape. Uh, Opportunities come out of the woodwork, inquiries start to happen, and we're away now, almost halfway through the year, and there is some fear, some uh, challenge, some trepidation with all of that. But then on the other side of the ledger, there's a trust and a faith in the fact that what you do is has been good enough, for the last 30 years. So it's probably going to be good enough for the next 12 months as well.
Yeah, so 31 years this year, is that right? In 1994 is when you
Correct.
made the move from becoming or practicing law
Yeah.
to become a poet. You want to talk about that time then when you were in law and you thought, hang on a second, there might be an opportunity here in a field which not many people are playing in.
Yeah, well, I'd already started that ball rolling, whilst I was an article clerk, scratching out odes and tributes to my heroes. I guess more as a hobby to start with, whilst I was waiting for my number to be called, in the magistrate's court to file a document or serve a summons or whatever the case was. There was a lot of sitting around waiting, pre-mobile phones, of course. So, yeah, I went, when I'd read the sport section of the Courier Mail, I started scratching out these poems, and so I had achieved some momentum in that space whilst I was still in the law. But it got to a point where I was starting to take it to bigger stages, and not only was I writing of my own volition and passion, I was being commissioned or asked to write tributes to certain situations, mostly sport back then, if not all. Uh, but long story short, I got to the point where I realised that I was at the crossroads and I had to make a choice. So I'd been sent out to our suburban office. This is the law firm that I was working for, Cranston McEachran and Co. They sentenced me to Strathpine for my sins. And listen, it was a developing neighbourhood. I mean, I grew up at Redcliffe, so I'm not throwing stones at
No,
Strathpine.
no,
Don't get me wrong, but it was a difficult, harsh environment for a young family law article clerk turned solicitor. And
to spend your days there.
right.
Yeah.
So there I was on a winter's day in 1994 with my Big Rooster Paradise pack at lunch.
The big blue bird,
I
big
c-
rooster. Remember that?
Right back,
Do you have the gravy as well?
way back then. I cut a lonely figure.
This is prior to red rooster, everyone. A big rooster
Yeah.
was the way to go.
Yeah, we better
Chips and gravy.
inform the listeners.
Oh, life in the 90s.
Yeah.
Mid 90s, yeah?
So I mean, I basically, I kind of sensed that there wasn't a lot of love in the family law division of the Petrie Magistrates Court.
Yes, it wasn't a positive environment to come
No,
home
it
from.
was quite depressing actually. And dare I say it, I saw a fair bit of injustice in those family law situations, mostly because children were caught in the middle of it. And someone's got to be there, for those situations, for those families, for those children. But my personality was such that I just couldn't cut it off. Like when I went home, I took it with me, and I realised that it wasn't a great environment for me. And if I had stayed in the law, I probably would have gone into other areas that more suited my style. But having said that, I've been writing these poems and tributes and getting some momentum, some media coverage. I had a manager even at that point. Um, I had two voices to listen to. One that said, "No, you've got 12 years education under your belt. You've done 4 years of a law degree. You've done 2 years of your article clerkship, and now you're going to be a solicitor because this is the way that it should be." That was one voice. And the other voice said, "Mate, what's the path of your greatest passion? Where does that take you?" And so I decided to turn left, take the road less travelled.
Wow. And then at the time, you were doing these odes. Have you always been like a sports, like a reader of newspapers, a scores person, a numbers person with sports? Has it always been around that? Were you that type of guy or that type of kid?
Yes, I was very passionate about sport. I wasn't such a brainiac in terms of facts and figures, but I guess trivial notions of who played this and what horse won the Melbourne Cup then, and that was all a big part of our existence in the late 80s and 90s. Myself and mates and whatnot, and I played footy and cricket, and I always say in my presentations that I was a kid who grew up in a backyard just off Duffield Road in Margate with two brothers. In the winter, we bashed the hell out of each other playing backyard footy, and I dreamt that one day I'd wear the green and gold for Australia. And that was a genuine dream. And in the summer, we wheeled the wheelie bin out, taped up the tennis ball, pushed off the back fence, come in flying at 1,000 miles an hour, trying to knock each other's heads off playing backyard cricket. And I honestly believe that one day I might wear the baggy green. It was just a backyard where anything and everything was possible. And there was even a time when I believed or dreamt that I could do both, play cricket for Australia and footy for Australia and ride the winner of the Melbourne Cup in between.
Well, Jeff Wilson around that era did both. Remember that?
Yeah,
the Kiwis.
he was pretty handy.
Yeah. Yes.
He got the trifecta, didn't he? Cricket, rugby, and basketball, and he was a lot better than I was.
And in terms of the backyard rules, did you have electric wiki, six and out, and one hand would bounce?
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, it all depended on your geography and how many neighbours you could rope in for whatever rules you employed.
Windows, whatever it might be.
And smash windows, it was game over for a fair while.
Lost ball in the bougainvillea.
Yeah, lost ball. Try and find another one. It was, the road was 6 and out. I mean, I wrote a poem about it at one point. Geez, now I'm trying to just like pick it up halfway through. But, one hand off the road was out. One hand off the house was out, the road was 6 and out, and that 6 was often worth it if the fruit was there to clout. Hit the car, you're gone, my friend, the shed is that way, son, in the name of backyard cricket. Geez, we had some bloody fun, yeah.
There you go. Reciting poems, you've done so many. Can you do that now, you think, on most poems that you've written? Or is it just some bits and pieces it's very hard because you've done so many?
It's hard to pick one up in the middle, like I just did then, because you generally start and it just one line leads you to the next. So trying to cut in halfway through is fraught with danger. There's only like a body of work, a section of the poems that I've written that I could roll out at any moment. It's a healthy section though, and it's a good party trick. It's good to throw, a state of origin. Beware the wounded Queenslander as he battles for the crown. Never ride him off, and he will never let you down. At the pub, at the Caxton on May the 28th in a couple of weeks' time. Yeah,
just right opportune time, footy season, environment, etc. I'm curious to know when you started who your paying customers were. Like, how did you make money at the start doing odes? Was it a personal thing? Was it someone, or is it a media company, or is it a corporate? How did that start?
Well, the first gigs that I got were for love, not money. And they were my mate's 21sts, which morphed into a emceeing a wedding for one of the brothers of one of those mates. But of course, there was no cash exchanged on those occasions. As I mentioned, it was all a bit of fun and a hobby, passionate one at that. So when I wrote that poem, Queenslander, it was "Go you bloody Queenslander, offload that magic pass, grab that dirty cockroach and kick his cocky ass."
Are you going to reveal that at the Caxton as well? Do you think we might just tone that one down a little bit?
No, it'll be in full bloom because nothing's changed.
Yeah, it's an origin
in
broadly speaking.
In 2025 than it was in 1993 when I wrote that, and I just wrote it for the hell of it, and I faxed it. See,
there you go.
All of these references,
yeah. No phones, no internet,
and Big Rooster,
Big Rooster. Yep.
So I faxed it to the QRL on a whim and thought nothing of it. Queensland won that game, by the way. It was Bob Linder's. It was Game 3 in '93. Bob Linder's last, and the next edition of Rugby League Week, which I scooped up from the newsagents on my way to work, I was turning the pages, and there were the words to my poem. In this
is '93 before you made the choice to become
yes
full time.
Yeah, I was reading it in my office at work. Did I have an office? Anyway, I was
before you got siphoned off to Strathpine.
Correct. Yeah. I was in Charlotte Street, the 15th floor of the Citibank building in Brisbane, and I thought, wow, I've made it. Like it's my poem in Rugby League Week, the sacred magazine. And I was reading through it, and then at the bottom of the poem or underneath it said, "Oh, this poem was found on the dressing room floor, before Game 3, anonymous, like there was no name to it. It was like, Phantom had written this poem." So Tony Durkin was the journo, and I'd played rugby with his son, James. So I rang Durko and I set him straight. And I said, that poem, it's my work. So God bless him. He sent a photographer in, took a photo of me in my law office, did a little story on me for the next edition of Rugby League Week. And so it was out there, and that there was this young kid in a law office who played rugby for brothers on the weekend, writing poetry that was inspiring Queensland State of Origin teams. And so to answer your question, which I was always getting to, Chris, don't worry, John Connolly, who coached the Queensland Reds during that era, he'd organised a function, a luncheon event at Alice's Rock Cafe.
Next to the Criterion, by the way. Eh?
Exactly. And so he asked if I would come along and recite my Origin Ode to the audience. And he was going to pay me $100.
To go and speak with all your kind of idols or people around you, and you're like, absolutely, right. I'll do it for free.
Well, no, I mean, I had done it for free up until that point.
Yeah,
I probably would have done it for free as well. But
$100, you're like,
it was like Christmas and Easter combined. And so I thought, wow, I just cannot believe that this is happening. And they dressed me up in Origin gear, and I probably, I don't know, I think I did all right, but I would have been nervous. Got the job done. I took the cash, and the rest is history. Just moved on from there.
You mentioned the word nervous there. Do you get nervous?
All the time. But I've learned over the years how to convert those nerves and those butterflies into positive energy, almost adrenaline. Like it's just understanding that is part of the equation. When you've prepared something and there's a stage and you're about to step up and there's a significant audience expecting that it's going to be good, that pressure to deliver, I mean, it creates a lot of nervous energy. But you can either lean back and shy away from it. And at the start, sometimes you tend to do that because you're scared of stuffing it up. or you can lean towards it and realize or tell yourself that this is where you're meant to be. Like, this is what you're good at. So you might as well embrace it. You might as well enjoy it. Even if you do not get it 100% right, that's all part of the journey. So get on with it.
Have you had some instances where you haven't got it 100% right, and you thought to yourself that wasn't up to your best?
Oh, all the time. Yeah, it's you try to keep those occasions to a minimum. It's the good, the bad, and the ugly, yeah. And you hope that most of it's good. Some of it might be bad, and that not too much of it's ugly.
Mm.
But that's just part of living life. It's part of the process. It's part of getting better. Is making those mistakes. When I was at that stage back in 1994. So I wrote Queenslander in 93. I retired from the law in 94. It's almost sounding poetic. And I was asked to write a poem for Mal Meninga's testimonial. And it was going to be beamed live on the Footy Show, which was a Brisbane edition back then. And so I'd written this, what I thought was, going to be a showstopper, a blockbuster. If I can just recall, some of the lines. It was one Friday night and the test match was tight and the Kiwis were holding the ruse. So Bluey, my mate, was becoming irate. It was something he couldn't excuse. Get up and belt him. It's time that we dealt him some fairnickum kangaroo curry. But despite what he yelled, all our moves were repelled, and so Bluey went out for a durry. Well, he shouldn't have done, because then came the run that would alter the course of this test. With not long to go, I did not really know, but my life was about to be blessed. The back line hand shifted to Daly, who drifted from left to the right of the pitch. Then there did enter one big outside centre, about to connect with a switch. Well, to say he was flying is under-implying, because nothing had ever been surer. With a look that said kill, he burst onto the pill with the speed of the Southern Aurora. And his big legs were pumping, his shoulders were thumping, as like a torpedo he crashed. And I heard him to say, if you get me way, then it's simple, you get flamin' smashed. Well, the poor little Kiwis, they flew in like peewees, but sadly their feathers were trampled. They lay on the floor much like victims of war. 'Twas a dose of Big Mal they had sampled. Then Bluey burst in with a devilish grin and said, what in the hell's this commotion? I pointed the finger. They call it Meninga, the man of perpetual motion.
Mate, that is outstanding. You
So,
got the rhythm again.
Yeah, I
right?
haven't recited that for probably 15 years, but it's embedded in my psyche. But on this night of,
Footy Show.
the Footy Show, but it was a live audience at the Hilton, but it was just that it was being beamed into lounge rooms as well. That's as a good reflection of how pumped up I was and how well I was going, with the recital, until I got to a point later on where I hit the speed bump and the computer scrambled and I got rattled.
So you didn't have anything you were reading from, or you did?
I had a
nice.
safety net, yeah, but I basically let that go in my mind because I thought that I was home and host. So even though that was there, at that stage of my career, I got all hot and bothered, and I guess I was in trouble. I was sort of paddling in the deep end, just trying to get back on track, because there's so much rhythm that goes with it that once you lose your rhythm, yeah, it can be like a little bit of a train wreck. So anyway, I mean, I did. I reconnected with my words and I finished it off. But I walked out of that room that night absolutely distraught, devastated, broken, thinking that was the end of my career in poetry. I would be going back to the family law. Quick, smart. So, yes, is the answer to the question. There have been those moments, but like a lot of things in life, it's what you learn from it and how you get better from it when you get the same opportunity on another stage next time.
Do you think about the stage at all, or you just think this is just another presentation, or if you're in front of the MCG or you're in New York City and you've got, or you're beamed across somewhere, does it overawe you a little bit, or you just think, no, it's just, no matter how many people could go to, I'm just going to do what I'm going to do?
Oh, there are certain stages that you can't deny, carry a greater gravity of importance, than some others. But the process of not being totally, unraveled, by that kind of flood of of emotion and thought that, what if I get it wrong? What if they don't like it? Yeah, you just have to go into your zone, and I've just got better at that over the years. So reciting at Ground Zero to the firefighters of 9/11, and their families. Uh, when I look back at at the YouTube clip or the recording of that, it's almost like I can't remember how I did it. It was like you'd put all that training in all your life, all your career, and you get to those big stages, and sometimes you go into automatic pilot to a certain extent, and you relax and you embrace that emotion, and you actually turn it into something really special. Not quite sure how that works, but it's very rewarding,
Mm.
when you can feel that, and you can feel that you've inspired an audience and you've made a difference to the world.
You mentioned emotion a couple of times there, and there's been some deeply emotional tributes or poems that you've done. Does it overwhelm you sometimes what you're doing and what you're thinking about, and it hits home while you're talking, and you think, "I've just got to let that go and finish the job"?
Again, I think that there's been a few of those big stages where you may, when you're rehearsing the poem, for example, Anzac Cove at Gallipoli, you get emotional and you think, wow, like I'm struggling to learn to rehearse this. It's all a bit too much. It's overwhelming, um, and you think that perhaps if you can't rehearse it and not kind of get through that difficult part, then what happens if we get up there and it's the same thing? But 99 times out of 100, I'm able to suck it in, like just that emotion, and I can almost like feel it in the crowd. I can feel the crowd getting emotional, and it's almost like I'm transferring it, from me, like to them, and I'm able to do the job. Like it's almost like I realize that this is this is a blessing, this opportunity, and so it's a little bit of business as usual for me. It's almost like um, I go into a different zone or a different mode, when I really need to deliver.
And if you're starting to think that you're feeling some emotion, that there's a good pause, the voice changes a little bit, or you just in auto,
Oh no, yeah, there's all of that. Yeah, there's a
which you've mastered over the
yeah,
course of refine and learn over years.
almost instinctively, I would say. I've never been trained, but you take the audience for a ride. The three things that I need to satisfy when I'm talking to an audience, whether it be at Ground Zero or Anzac Cove or in a classroom, or here today. First of all, get their attention with what you want to say and your story. Once you've, and that can be difficult, but don't ramble. Just like, here we are. Um, I've got something to say. So You get their audience, you get their attention, and once you've done that, you take them for a ride, and it's got to be exciting. It can't be boring. It's got to be the same kind of roller coaster ride that I've lived. It's up and down, and it's light and shade. It's fast and it's slow and it stops and it goes again. But ultimately, the third box that I need to tick is deliver a message. Make sure you leave the audience with something that they didn't have, before they arrived. Potentially something that lifts them and inspires them and makes them feel better about themselves or the world in which they live.
When you get commissioned to someone that's potentially, like I think Bill Gates, and you've had
Mm.
famous people that have taken you around the world, where do you start with the research with someone to kind of make sure it is special? It's not just generic.
Uh, Good question. I think you realize that every person, who you've been asked to pay tribute to has a really worthy story. No matter how much glitter
Yeah.
like the world casts upon them, that story could be a tribute to Roger Federer, or it might be a tribute to the volunteer, down at the local rugby league club, who's been there for 50 years, at the tuck shop and on the scoreboard. I find inspiration in both of those situations. So I try not to get too ramped up about someone like Roger Federer, um, and I paid tribute to him, at the same time as Rod Laver. That was challenging. But do you know what? Like the quality that those two have in common, and so does the tuck shop volunteer at the rugby league club, is humility. And so for all their great achievements, and glory, kind of like what draws me, like a moth to that flame, is something like humility. I I realized at some point along the way that my job, if I get it right, is to connect with the heartbeat, like of any given situation. And if I can tap into that pulse, connect with the heart and soul of Roger Federer or, Barry Smith, then the audience will experience, a similar kind of ride that I can take them on, and it's emotional. It's sometimes it's adverse, sometimes it's tragic, but then it can be triumphant and uplifting and inspiring. It's a sum of all things, and if I get it right, it's so very rewarding.
Do you need to speak to the person for a little bit before you write a poem about or something you want to clarify,
Not
or
not
get a
always.
body language or something to go, I just need a little bit more?
Most of the time, when I'm paying tribute to someone these days, it's a surprise to them, which I think makes a good impact. It's a little bit, this is your life-ish.
Remember that?
Yeah. Roger Clemson. But
12th Man also went down. Remember that?
yes, he did. Yes, he did. Billy Birmingham. And I did a gig with Billy once, but that's another story. Yeah, so I don't necessarily have to connect with that person. It's family, it's mates, it's friends, it's what they've done, it's what you can research, it's the questions that you ask. So somehow, when you've got all the jigsaw pieces, throw them on the table, start putting them together, and writing that poem.
Eh, is there a particular uh, area of the poem that you find troubling to get going? Is it the start or the middle, or once you get going, you kind of you refine, you learn. It doesn't sound right. Do you say it with passion? You go, oh, this is not 100% right.
Yeah, all the time. I I ride that horse as well. all of that. So, like, if you had all the jigsaw pieces on the table and you look at it, you think, where do I start? And you keep looking at it, and you know, some people might just give up on it, throw them back in the box. But all of a sudden, you see those two corner pieces, something, right? That's a good start, and it starts to take shape. Quite often, writing a poem is like that. Yeah, it can be hard to break through. I've got to find an angle. So with Rod Laver and Roger Federer, I had to write this piece that paid tribute to both of the greatest tennis players in our history, arguably at the time, and give them equal billing, like 50-50. They're in the same room. So I'm thinking, how is this best done? And you think for a long time before you get that light bulb moment and then start putting the pieces together. And for that one, it was like, okay, what if they played against each other, in this fantasy, this imaginary game of tennis, on a higher cloud? And so I called it the masterpiece, not because my poem was a masterpiece, but that game would be a masterpiece of tennis. Once you've got the idea, once you've got the angle, once you've cracked it open, you feel like you've got some momentum and you just ride that wave for all it's worth. Fine-tuning it, finishing it can also be difficult because you want to make it perfect. And us poets and artists, painters, singers, creators, pretty much all of us are perfectionists, which drives us almost mad, insane, but that's just the way it is. So, yeah, then you start fine-tuning, and you get to a point. Sometimes the title is the hardest thing because you think you've got to call it's got to be good, it can't be something that immediately gets lost on so when someone's reading it. So that can be challenging. And then, like you just said, Chris, you might have done all of that and you're waiting in a hotel room to walk out to deliver a firefighter's dream for the first time to the Australian firefighters it was in Sydney before they went over to New York, and ultimately they took me with them. But I didn't know it then. I'd just been asked to write this piece, and I was going over it in my head, and I thought, this is not good enough. Like it's absolutely not good enough for the gravity of this situation, 9/11, 343 firefighters who didn't make it home to their families. But it's too late now. I felt like running, but I couldn't do that. So it's just those moments of self-doubt that, you still have, no matter how many times you've done it, but then you've got to summons that other voice that says, there's nowhere you can be, that isn't where you're meant to be. Just take hold of it. You can give it your best shot, and hopefully it will be well received.
And being the perfectionist that you mentioned, when someone gives you feedback or potentially is a little critical of you, do you take it a bit personally?
I have, yeah. I mean, we are human beings. Again, less so in recent times, more so when you're starting out, and pride can become a dominant force. You don't really like being told that you missed an angle here, or that didn't quite go over, or that's all part of it. And so, these days, rather than just shutting that person down, I'll pay more attention to it. And sometimes you think, oh, well, I still think I got it right. But you give a person or a potential critic your ear, and then, I don't know, they become your friend almost,
Yeah,
and
maybe sometimes
yeah.
they care or something. They're like, there's an inherent thing of like, they might think they're helping you or something. Maybe, I don't know. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's an interesting one.
Some things you
Feedback.
get criticized for are just ridiculous, like
Yep.
you can't help it. It might be you're emceeing a gig and, you've been given a run sheet and you had no control over it.
And you're late or the microphone doesn't work. Have you had a few little things where things just haven't gone, like the mic hasn't, well, now you have to yell it or you have to,
Yeah, you've always got to be ready to improvise.
Yep.
And
weddings that haven't worked or
Yeah.
echoism or something, or you're running late?
yeah, I mean, avoid the car crash at all costs. Be ready.
You were here early, Rupert, for the podcast.
Be
so-
prepared. Be ready for all
How-
angles of adversity.
How much time, in terms of preparing for a poem, has it sort of potentially shrunk to? If someone gives you 48 hours that it's the best gig of your life, can you do it?
Yeah. There's no rhyme nor reason about any of that. But I have had some pretty unrealistic requests, with skinny deadlines, and I found a way to get it done. I try to avoid that, but yeah, sometimes it's it's just a necessary part of doing what you do. So yeah, I back myself in most situations.
You're a confident person. Is that a good assessment of my thinking? Are you a confident person, or are you sort of a little bit like, is confidence a strong trait that you'd think you
Oh, I'm not
of
sure
your
about that.
personality? Yeah.
I'm not sure. I think I was confident when I was a young person that I was going to make a mark. I don't want that to sound arrogant.
You had belief.
Yeah, I just remember being a kid. As I said, sport was probably where I hoped. But I just thought, I've got it in me, to do something that was out of the ordinary, like that could make a difference. So I guess you have to be confident, in that sense. And certainly, when I sat down with my career guidance officer in grade 10, he didn't suggest that a full-time poet was part of that career plan or option. So I had to have the
How does it sound when you say it yourself now?
Yeah, it sounds a bit crazy, but I had to have the confidence to overcome those
Yep.
those moments, and continue believing. But then, as I said, there's moments of self-doubt and times where you thought, this is tough. I've got to write this poem, not because I absolutely am passionate about the request or because I want to do it, but I have a family. I have a mortgage to pay. Like, if you retire as a solicitor and take up life as a full-time poet, which I'm not sure my parents were entirely convinced about when I told them the first time.
Belief.
You know that there's going to be some tough moments. There's going to be some dark chapters, where it's not all flowing, where gigs are a struggle, or the requests aren't quite coming in. So that's where I suppose the belief, which evolves into confidence when you can get through those great moments of self-doubt and adversity and survive. It's a survival instinct, really. And I mean, what am I best at? What's my best contribution to the world look like? I didn't think it was as a family law solicitor, but continuing this great tradition of storytelling that we have in this country, honoring the blood that we bleed for telling a story, and the poets of the past. When you, I guess, assume the responsibility of continuing that legacy, of flying that flag and taking it forward, yeah, that's where you better have belief in yourself.
If there's a poet or there's probably been poets out there that said, I wanna take the Rupert McCall path. I wanna be like Rupert McCall. How does that make you feel?
It's humbling. It's humbling when a grade 5 student contacts you through your website and tells you that most of the class for their poetry assignment have chosen Banjo Paterson and most of the rest have chosen Henry Lawson, but I've chosen you. That's amazing. I guess they can't or they can't contact Banjo through his website.
That's right. Yes.
This
Yep.
kid's a genius, but I could tell them everything that he or she needs to know, and I take great pride in that. I want to get that kid an A,
Yeah.
and then I guess around that you have a situation where you feel like you're half contributing to a revival of the spoken word, of poetry, this endangered species. And so when younger people send me their poetry and ask for my feedback or critique, I'm really, really happy and to give it to them and to make it as positive as possible. But making a living out of it, it sure is tough.
You touched on about sort of the extinct nature potentially of poets, etc. We've got things like ChatGPT and AI and all that sort of stuff now.
Yeah, it's coming for me.
Yeah, and you had books as well, and books there was an angle about we'd still got the book, but
Yeah.
that wasn't as popular nowadays. I wouldn't have thought with some things and reading poems and books.
Hmm.
How have you gone about managing that sort of technological thing?
Well,
right?
you can't run away from it.
Yeah.
You've got to embrace it. I still feel like a book of poetry, an anthology of verse. It occupies a good place, like within the covers of a traditional book. It sits well on a coffee table or a bar, or the toilet floor,
Yep.
toilet room floor.
Or the change rooms of a State of Origin team.
Right. Well, there you go.
Anonymous.
Yeah, 32 years ago. So that's that. But you have to look out the window and say, well, this is 2025. So, during COVID, I was very quick to take this, my best of anthology, Golden Soil, available not in all good bookstores, but through my website, but we might get to that at the end, and convert it into an audio book. And then there was the live stream and all of that kind of thing. This podcast, I mean, it's a reflection of the modern day and what will be next. That's the question. The other thing is that not only writing, but not even reading. I would even go beyond reciting. I would say performing like a piece of poetry to an audience is really important in making it cool again, and keeping it relevant and having people say, wow, there's still a place for poetry in the modern world.
And particularly with all these different distractions, I'd imagine with AI and with gaming and all these things that kids are going through and whatnot, actually performance of something, it's very hard to replace, I would imagine, forever.
I hope so.
Mm.
Yeah. Definitely we're living in that T20 fast food kind of world environment. Social
Instant
media,
gratification.
right? Everyone will have their 5 seconds of fame in this day and age.
Yep.
I think that time limit's come down through the years. But yeah, when you can stop an audience in their tracks with a beautiful piece of poetry or an inspiring tribute to a great racehorse, or a brave soldier, then keep them in the palm of your hand for 5 to 7 minutes or whatever the case is. That's an art. And I'm still learning it. I'm still crafting it, or I'm still refining it and hopefully improving.
Your relationship with poetry over time, have you always enjoyed it, or is there moments there where you went, "Actually, I'm 5 years in and it's just I don't know, I'm gonna throw the towel in."
Yeah, well, again, we can talk idealistically or we can just be truthful and say that at some point of this amazingly epic journey, like work is work,
Yep.
and you are sick of it. You know, you've had a gutful of trying to get yourself up, you know, to inspire the next audience or to write the next piece because there's an expectation, there's a standard that you set. You know, the moment that you drop below it, you know, is the moment that you start looking at the scoreboard, hang up the boots. And I'm not ready for that yet. So, but it's part of it, right? Like, I mean, you have your good days and your bad days. But when I got to those crossroads and I took the road less traveled, I knew that it was something that more often than not, like, would put a smile on my face, and that I wouldn't be dragging my ass around, you know, and kicking stones. So I have no regret, like, for the path that I've chosen, but it's not all rainbows and happy times. You know,
Mm.
you've got to go through the grind sometimes and come out the other side.
What about your relationship with sport? Has it got because it's intertwined a little bit with work? Have you always stayed that you love enjoying watching sport, or you
Yeah.
now because it is work, you're like, "Oh, I just have to think about this," and from a work point of view as opposed to just reliving that moment?
Well, you you still love what you love. I mean, it's in your blood. I can't wait for Origin 1. Same as I couldn't wait in 1980, you know, for that game. Sometimes when you have to go to an event, for example, Winx's last race at Royal Randwick, and you know it's just such a wonderful, special occasion, but you have to deliver a poem at the end of it to the connections, you know, in a private party. You don't enjoy it as much because you're thinking about doing your job, like, at the end of the day. That's just the way it goes, you know? You'd rather be in that position than not, making a contribution, like, on such an historic day and stage. Um, where it all started for me, and perhaps I should just quickly tell this story, was in 1980. So I was in grade 5, just like that student who contacted me
Through
through the
your
website
website,
the other
yep.
day. And my teacher, Mr. Grant, we had a parent-teacher night where every class, there was only one class for each grade, for each year, I should say, at Woody Point at Our Lady of Lourdes. In our grade 5 class, we had to put on a show, like an act performance for our parents at a parent-teacher night, and all the classes did something different. Well, we got handed out the textbooks, open up, page whatever. This is what we're going to learn and deliver for our parents. And it was on the outer Baku where the churches are few and the men of religion are scanty, on a road never crossed set by folk who were lost, one Michael McGee had a shanty. And in that moment, I was exposed to the poetry, to the storytelling of Banjo Paterson and a bush christening. And I learnt that poem off by heart, and I recited it to my mum and dad. I didn't know it then, but it lit a spark inside me. You know, McGuinness McGee was made a JP, and the one thing he hates more than sin is to be asked by the folk who have heard of the joke how he came to be christened McGuinness. Great, it's a wonderful story. They're the first and last verses. What was in the middle lit a spark inside me. But it wouldn't have been the same if not at exactly the same time as I got introduced to Banjo Paterson, a big Indigenous rugby league player who hailed from Roma and had come back from Sydney to captain a team of Queenslanders in this experimental game of rugby league at Lang Park on a night in 1980, burst out of the tunnel to a roar that we heard at Redcliffe, my brothers and I, sitting around the television in our lounge room there at Margate, and State of Origin was born. That combination of forces, Banjo Paterson and Arthur Beetson, I mean, it's an unlikely quinella. But it was a collision that, for me, paved the way for what I was to become.
I was just about to ask the scoreboard moment, which is a moment in your life that you remember so vividly, but you may have already answered. Was that your moment? You just distinctly remember the sport, the grade 5, the origin, the parent-teacher interview, and now you're here. You look back. It must be fun to look back.
It does. It puts a smile on my
Yeah.
face.
Is there another moment that you remember?
It was a pretty special moment,
Yeah.
even though I didn't realise it at the time. And I say a moment, I mean, that was probably like over a month when those two things happened. But when you that far back, it's only a moment, isn't it? The other moment, and again, it ties in with the conversation that we've already had. So some of it I've already covered in terms of nerves and stages and not wanting to stuff it up, understanding that if you get this wrong, this could be the end. And so I was by the side of the stage at Anzac Cove in 2005, having been commissioned, asked to pay tribute to the 90th anniversary at the landing of Gallipoli. And so that request comes with a responsibility to make sure that you damn well get it right. And there's 20,000 people there, mostly in the dark, thank God. But I'm nervous as I've ever been, and cold, bitterly cold. And the wind's cutting through me, and about to embark upon the most important moment, in my professional life. And I'm shivering, and someone asks if I would like to lend their scarf because I'm turning purple. And I try to say yes, and no word comes out of my mouth. I mean, it was absolute terror. And I'm thinking, it might be too big for me. All of these things go through your head. Is this it? Is this where I become unstuck? My grandfather, Barney McCall, fought as a rat of Tobruk in World War II. God bless those boys. And so I had his ID bracelet in my hand. He called them his meat tickets, but it's basically what he wore during the war in Tobruk and New Guinea. And the moment that I remember is realizing that I had that on me and thinking that on this very patch of sand 90 years before, there were young Australian kids, the same age as my boys now, younger, jumping out of a boat, getting through the water, trying not to get shot, watching their mates die around them, find shelter just to survive one day. And all I had to do was recite a poem. So I get emotional now recounting that because it's what drives me, those kind of feelings. And I think of, my grandfather as well. But that was a moment of perspective, for me, where whenever I got nervous thereafter, like for a big stage, I think back to then, go, well, all I have to do is do what I love.
There's a deep reflection as well as connection to something there, and you've gone back to that connection, which gives you, I suppose, the adrenaline and the emotion to then now go out and perform. It's quite powerful that you've gone back to different moments which
Yeah.
can drive you, and I suppose that also becomes a catalyst to some degree to show your emotion while you're performing. It's quite powerful.
I think so. It's another one of, I guess, the qualities of my poetry in the writing of it and in the reciting of it is saying to grown men that it's all right to cry a tear. it's all right to be emotional. I mean, this is the the fabric of who we are. We're human beings that we laugh, but we also cry. And so there's a beauty in that. And so Green and Gold Malaria, which I wrote in 1995, my tribute to Australian pride, that was the whole premise of that poem, and it's still probably my most popular piece in this country, at least, because it it pays tribute to, I think, what my grandfather fought for, and what those young Anzac soldiers fought for as well. It's a freedom to choose. I mean, we live in a land, whether you like it or not, where solicitors have the opportunity to retire and become poets. It's a beautiful thing, don't take it for granted.
And not back then. There was no choice. Yeah. You get inscripted, off you go, right? As well. Rupert, I'm going to ask you about your favourite all-time sporting moment. You would have seen a few in your time. Now, I'm unsure you can probably narrow it down to one, but
Yeah, I have a myriad of inspirational moments to select from, a plethora, in fact. But just to try and tie all of this together, I retired from the law midway through '94, as mentioned. Coming into Christmas, I was thinking this is a brave decision to have done that. But if I don't back it up, then I could easily just end up, back in that magistrate's court. I was writing for the Courier Mail, and in December, the summer of cricket, I wrote an ode to backyard cricket, a few lines which I've recited earlier. And then the next month, it's kind of like a poem per month for whatever the flavour was. It was January 1995. I wrote Green and Gold Malaria. I wasn't going to have to go back to the law office in a hurry. And then a couple of months after that, well, I've mentioned the Rugby World Cup, which was midway through '95, being at Ellis Park when Nelson Mandela came out in the Springbok jersey on a world stage. That was an epic shiver down my spine. In between, I mean, so much happening. In between Green and Gold Malaria and the Rugby World Cup, a certain Sheffield Shield victory transpired at the Gabba, the first for Queensland ever. And, there I was on the Gabba Hill leading the choir for 5 days with some of my best mates, when big Carl Rackerman outstretched arms took the catch. I think Paul Jackson was
Paul
the
Jackson was
bowler,
the
and
bowler, yep.
Jason
Spinner.
Gillespie might have been the batsman taking strike. Well, it was, apart from Arthur Beats and Origin 1, I think that was just the greatest moment for a Queensland sporting fan. And I was part of it. I wrote poetry inspired by losses, and then that triumph. I contributed to songs that we sung on the hill for 5 days. And some of those guys who are part of that victory, are now my best mates, the likes of Andy Bickle and Michael Kasperwich, Carl himself, Big Mocker, Carl Rackerman, Alan Border, who I call my friend, one of my greatest heroes, with Wally Lewis in that era where we did believe that anything and everything was possible, because those guys, they showed that it was, with their backs against the wall. And so we won that Sheffield Shield. I was hoisted onto the shoulders of spectators on the field once I got there. And I was given a megaphone, and I recited Queenslander, Beware the Wounded Queenslander, even though it's a rugby league poem, it fit the occasion. And that night, in the Cricketers Club, after that victory and before we went to City Rowers, I met the girl who would become my wife.
Wow.
Yeah.
that particular day,
That night.
that night, yeah.
She thought I was an idiot at the time because we're all pretty drunk. She scammed her way into the Cricketers Club because she grew up in country Queensland, Augathello. Cricket was always on the radio. Her dad was a cricket fan. And so she was in the Cricketers Club. She caught my eye, and amazing to think that, however many years later, we're married with 4 children, the youngest of which has just finished school.
So you got sport, you got poetry, you got laughter, happiness, you got life, all in one day.
And I've got a daughter, by the way, who's now a solicitor.
Not at Strathpine.
No, I couldn't talk her out of it, but she's doing a great job.
What a great sporting moment that was for Queenslander. 69 years, I think, the Shield had been then, and a fair bit of hunters and collectors, the Holy Grail. Eh?
Yeah. Well, I woke up that morning from the strangest dream.
Rupert McCall, thank you so much for coming in, being part of Scoreboard, the podcast, and sharing your insights and the stories around your life, and in sport and in business and all the things you do. I really do appreciate it, and looking forward to following your progress. And by the way, you've got your book again, so let's talk about your book.
Yeah, well, when you retire from the law and you want to embark upon this crazy notion of being a poet, well, you become a bit of a salesman as well. This is my best of anthology, my greatest hits, if you like. Golden Soil, from Green and Gold Malaria, all the way through to tributes to 9/11 firefighters, Roger Federer, Winks, amongst others. And I put it out just before COVID, which was a fortunate thing because the walls came down for me during that phase. But I'm proud of the book, and it's served me well. Golden Soil.
Golden Soil, available from your website,
rupertmccall.com.au.
Beautiful. You should be proud of all your work, and I'm looking forward to getting a copy. Thank you again, Rupert.
I've enjoyed the chat, Chris. Thanks very much.